Welcome to Curiosities of Teaching and Learning, a podcast hosted and produced by the Collaborative for Teaching and Learning, a change maker in education since 1994.
Hello and welcome to the 10th installment of Crushing COVID in the Virtual Classroom, a podcast from the Collaborative for Teaching and Learning. We're reaching out to master teachers from across the country to hear how they, their students, and colleagues are navigating teaching and learning during this unprecedented experience. Our hope is to elevate the voice of teachers in this massive effort and to recognize teachers as the leaders and pioneers that we know them to be. I am Victoria Miller Bennett, and I will be your host today. Welcome to our guest of honor, joining us from Oldham County, Kentucky, third grade teacher, Mrs. Amy Cordrey. Amy and I first worked together nearly 20 years ago. At the time, she was teaching third and fourth grade, and I was teaching first and second. As our careers have taken various twists and turns, I love that we have continued our work together on and off through the years. I consider her to not only be a mentor, but especially a great longtime friend. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to talk with me and to share your thinking and approach to distance learning during the pandemic with our listeners. To kick us off, Amy, please share with us, share with your audience a bit about yourself, your role, and your school.
Okay, well, hey, Victoria. I was sitting there listening to you talk, and it's sort of surreal, isn't it? Number one,
Yeah.
that we're in a pandemic, and number two, that here we are and such long-time friends and colleagues, and I think so much of you. So this is such a great opportunity for me to share with you. So let's see. My name is Amy Cordrey, and this is my 26th year in education. I know it's hard for me to believe, and I've had somewhat of an unconventional educational journey. I think some would say I started teaching elementary in 1996 or 7. I've lost track of all the years, but anyway, I taught for 9 years, and I taught all different grade levels in elementary, and then spent about 15 years in administration, either as an instructional coach, assistant principal. I was an elementary principal for 3 years, and then I was a district administrator for 5. And then in 2017, I had the opportunity to go back into the classroom. And so I've been teaching third grade at Buckner Elementary for 3 years, and it is an honor, it is a privilege to not only be back in the classroom where my heart has always been, but also to be a teacher during this time period that we're in right now with this pandemic, and seeing and engaging with children in the learning environment in a completely different way. So that's sort of a little bit about my educational journey. And then Buckner Elementary, it's well, I'm a little biased, but I call it the nirvana of of a school community, because it is about 630 students, kindergarten through 5th grade. It's in Oldham County, which is also a neighboring district to the metropolitan area of Louisville, Kentucky, but it has a strong sense of community. It's interesting. I don't know the exact percentage, but a large percentage of the students that are at that school, their parents grew up in that same community. So it has a strong sense of community. It's been a school of excellence since it was started, oh my goodness, 18 something years ago, maybe longer. So I apologize for that. But it is it's a very special school.
Thank you. Wow. It's interesting to me that you said something so important about the population and the parents and the children, that their parents have grown up here and now they're growing up here. And it's such a overall feeling of community, as I have also taught in the district, and absolutely an asset for sure.
Yes.
So this is, I guess, week 7 for NTI for you.
Gosh, yes. I can't believe that.
Yes,
it is.
And you have just a few more weeks to go. Is that right?
Yes, we end May 19th, so really about a week and a half from the recording of this podcast. Yes.
Okay. So if you can, paint us a picture for what the distance learning environment situation looks like for you and your students, if you could.
Okay, well, so it's probably important for the audience to know that we were not, Buckner Elementary was not 1-to-1 at the time that we went in this pandemic. We were probably about 2-to-1. But we also didn't have any structures or systems in place for any at-home learning. I know in our area there had been a lot of what we call snow go. We get a lot of, well, we don't get a lot of snow. We sometimes get a little snow that closes us down for a long period of time. So many districts had started a learn at home option for when there were snow days. We had not done that. And so when we got the announcement on, March 12th, we had no structure in place. We were fortunate at that time, the Friday the 13th, which is kind of funny, isn't it? Friday the 13th.
Yeah. Will not forget.
No, I can, it'll be one of those moments where you'll remember what you had on and where you were. But
yes.
It just so happened that it was a scheduled teacher work day and students were out. So our district really put it on the shoulders of our elementary principals to figure it out. What are we going to do? And at that time we had about 2 weeks that we thought we would be in this situation. And so I guess the best way to describe it when I look back on it now is almost like we got thrown into the engineering process, like what I teach my students. We had this problem that was given to us, and we had to get a clear understanding of that problem. We had to do some research about what was going to be best, and we had to get the right specifications. And so we had to figure out what are they capable of with technology at home, because we have most students who had internet access. Several to probably almost all of them had some device, whether it was a mobile phone or a Chromebook or that. But then what was challenging, which I think is across the nation right now, is that everybody's home school environment was going to be completely different. Mm-hmm. We had to factor in that some students had multiple siblings that were going to be navigating one device, or I have some parents who were first responders, nurses and doctors, people that worked in the food industry that were still working, on and on, right? So we know all of those dilemmas. So we tried to get all that on paper, to try to get that in our head to wrap around. And then we essentially collaborated as a PLC and created a prototype. Now looking back, it was clearly a prototype that we were going to implement the first 2 weeks. And what we decided to do at that time was to extend what we were currently working on. It was sort of a gift. We had just wrapped up ELA unit. We had just finished our fractions unit. We were at this really good place. It was the end of our third trimester.
Okay.
The day before was the end of our third trimester. And so we just continued to expand what they were doing in the classroom. So we created a written kind of lesson plan that parents could view and do without technology, but then we also put it on our Google Classroom and Google Slides so that those who did could access the tasks, either through technology or through looking at a hard copy.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
That was our initial, our initial learning environment.
Right. Did everybody already have Google Classroom in place, or would children be learning about Google Classroom as this unrolled?
Okay. So, and I'm going to speak of our third grade team. We all had Google Classroom set up, but we use them in different capacities. Even in my own classroom, I had some students where we used it more frequently because of differentiated tasks that I had assigned them, and some were less knowledgeable. So it was really kind of a wide spectrum of familiarity with Google Classroom.
Okay.
Which made it challenging in a lot of ways. And I will tell you that we still are not solely using Google Classroom. 7 weeks in, we've really figured out a way to navigate it where we didn't have to rely on Google Classroom as the way we were getting our students connected.
Gotcha.
I can talk a little bit about how we kept them all, how we kept the communication consistent because we did, well, I apologize for being random because we've had these such changes along the way, but back on that Friday the 13th, our team decided to do two things. One, we knew that consistency, continuity, and connectivity were going to be critical as we left, and we had no idea how long we were going to be away. So we knew that we all and all of our students use Google Slides regularly. That's how, as teachers, we navigate through our day. Our students are used to helping develop the slides, help moving through the slides. So that was like our hub. We called it our community hub. The other thing we knew was that class meeting, read aloud, our movement breaks, and our like related arts and transition activities were core. So we kept those all as part of our day. And then the other thing that we did that has stayed consistent is we kept our learning events in sequence to how our day was structured.
Okay, so that the children were used to that structure, so to speak.
Yeah.
What was first, what was in the middle, what was at the end.
Yes.
Okay, and was that K through 5, or just you're talking about third grade?
Third grade. So our principal, who is an exemplary model of leadership, really set some parameters on that the morning of Friday the 13th. She kind of brought us all together, helped us all create kind of our expectations and parameters, and then she let each grade level design and develop their plans according to their classroom and to their grade level.
Right, to fit their students and such.
To fit their students, to fit their families' needs.
Okay, so talk to me, if you will, a little bit about your typical day. And I'm lucky enough to have participated in a little bit of your day earlier today, but how instruction looks now, sort of your model that you've adopted for your students.
So we started out the first 2 weeks just extending what they had been doing, right? But at the end of the 2 weeks, we found out, as I'm sure most of the United States discovered, it was going to be longer. It was going to be 2 weeks, and then eventually through the end of the school year. So we felt strongly that we wanted to hold true to our beliefs about student learning. And so for me, every year I create a vision board for my students, and they're based on what I believe my students should be able to be like when they leave me and go on to fourth grade. And I want them to be compassionate leaders. I want them to be critical problem solvers. I want them to be readers, writers, thinkers, and I want them to be creative and innovative. So I kept coming back to that because you're getting flooded with not only a pandemic, personally and professionally, that's changing everything that you've done. And then you're getting frequent emails about all these different ways you can connect with students and all these different things that you can do. And, teachers need to be doing this. And I just kept going back to that. And workshop model is the approach that we've always used to facilitate those core beliefs. So our team decided after those 2 weeks to go back to workshop model. And what we do is each teacher took an area. I had writing. We split that up, and we would teach a mini lesson. And then their task was related to their work time. Mm-hmm. And then when it was appropriate, we had opportunities for shares. So we've kept that structure in place.
Okay.
So even though it's not as reciprocal as a typical classroom would be, where you're able to right there in real time, pull a group and confer and work with them. What we did was set up learning teams. So after the first 2 weeks, we got structured and organized. We assigned our students into groups of 4 to 5, and we established standing weekly meetings with these learning teams for the purpose of, 1, to give them a place to have dialogue and discourse about their learning. 2, where I could confer and work with them in small groups in reading, writing, and math, and then give them that social and emotional connection they needed to have with their peers.
Yeah.
So on a typical day, I start my day. The other thing that's important about this process, we didn't realize it then, but now, is that my team, we meet every morning at 8:30.
Together as a team, you mean?
Together as a team. And at first it was necessary because it was triage, like just, you know.
That word has come up often, triage.
Really? Well, that's really, I've not been in medical profession or anything like that, but that's what it felt like. And so that anchored us, you know, every morning if we could problem solve. And I guess hindsight's 2020, which is also a funny phrase now when you think about it. But anyway, that has really provided stability to me as a teacher. Not feeling isolated, not feeling that I had to figure this all out on my own. Every morning I had 8:30 connection time with my team.
Perfect.
So we connect, and then I have 3 different learning teams each day. And then I also, again, another strong belief is that students need to have autonomy and voice. There needs to be a level of agency that they have in their learning. So after we got a couple weeks, I started asking my kids, what do you need? And so what I realized is what they need and what they want is they want authentic learning. Like they want meaningful, rigorous. It was really shocking. It was one of the things I wrote down as something that stood out to me. Like they were getting tired of free writing. They wanted a writing project. Like they wanted to go through the writing process and create a writing project. They wanted they wanted math tasks that were rigorous so that they could collaborate. That was things they were used to. It feels good to them. So with all that being said, I have 3 different book clubs. I had some students that wanted to keep doing their book clubs. So I'll have 2 to 3 book clubs that meet. And then I had a group of students that wanted to do just higher level math tasks. So I created those groups. So I guess I would call those interest groups. And then I had students that needed one-on-one that really requested, like, I just need one-on-one time with you. So on a typical day, I have 2 to 3 like one-on-one conferences that I have with students for specific purposes.
Okay. So if you have 2 to 3 of those learning teams per day, does that mean you do not see every child every day, or they kind of rotate?
Yeah, I don't see every student every day. I have 28 students.
Wow. Okay.
So I see every student at least once a week.
Gotcha.
And I see some students 3 times a week.
It just depends on the child. It's very individualized, it sounds like.
And some don't need that. And I don't want, they are loving the independence. So as long as I can have them together for 30 to 45 minutes in that learning team and I can gauge, they do submit work every day. So that is something that also, they do submit their work every day. So that also keeps me connected to see how they're progressing.
Okay. And so they may take a picture and upload to Google Classroom or something like that?
Well, and that was something we learned in the first 2 weeks. We just kind of didn't know what parents were going to feel, because that was one of the first hurdles, was parents, being comfortable with the technology. But for my class, it worked great because half of them love Google Docs, and they made a folder and they just kept their work, progressive through their Google Docs. And then the other half did Seesaw, because Seesaw was a platform we had been using with families.
Okay. So you're getting some work through Google and some work through Seesaw. It just depends on the child or the family and their preference. Interesting. You kind of hit on this a little bit, but I'm going to get a little bit more specific about how we know that students have to interact with content by reading about it, writing about it, listening and speaking about it, as well as attending to vocabulary. How are you helping students in content in these ways from a distance? I mean, you hit on that a little bit, but could you cover that a little bit more?
Will you say that? How do they? Is my computer?
Yeah, it's okay. Basically, interacting with content through reading, writing, speaking, listening, vocabulary. How is that happening? I can kind of picture it based on the fact that you said like a book study, and or like I said, I participated in the mathematics today, and I was witness to that. But for those of us who didn't get to see that, talk a little bit about that.
Okay, well, and again, I go back to, it was important to our team to keep the learning authentic. We wanted it to be meaningful and relevant. We wanted it to feel to our students like an extension of their brick and mortar classroom, right?
Yeah.
So I think what maybe some parents expected at first would be like worksheets or like things like that, where the kids, they could like accomplish a task and be done with it.
Check it off and send it.
And that just wasn't aligned to our beliefs. And that's not what our learning environment looked like in classrooms. So in reading, what it looks like is, and I should say, we made a conscious decision with the support of the principal to not introduce new skills and concepts. We felt, because we actually were fortunate to have taught our like major units. We had just finished all of our main essential units.
Sure.
So we kind of saw it as a gift that we could deepen and extend that. Like, we don't normally get that gift, right? Like, we're moving on, and
we're not slowing down at this time of the year traditionally.
No.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, let's use this as a gift. So in reading, we wanted them choosing varied texts, just like they do in the classroom, a good fit books, which, by the way, I should say just for the audience that our principal had the foresight to know that something was coming, and actually opened up the library on Thursday afternoon and asked every student to take home 10 to 15 books.
Oh my gosh.
Now looking back on that, thank goodness. So, because they all had and we said collect fiction, nonfiction, just books. So they all had a collection of books. So we used this time to revisit all of our metacognitive thinking strategies and had them choose their text and be responding using the thinking strategies, which was a great opportunity for them. Sure. We were also working on stamina in reading. So we continued to have them set a timer and work on reading for 30 plus minutes. And then in writing, we wanted them to choose after we revisited our writing strategies and we gave them time to collect in their notebook, it was time for them to be in the driver's seat and choose their own writing project, go through the writing cycle, and then publish, which is what they're getting ready to do now. And in math, we spent time talking to them about the value of fluency and building up their fluency. So they're working on building up the fluency while we're also giving them meaningful math tasks.
Sure.
I'm personally using a lot of the 3-act tasks that I'm sure many people are familiar with, or just different real life tasks that they can solve using addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and fractions, which are the core math concepts for 3rd grade. Does that
yeah.
sort of answer?
Yeah. Any special tool or resource that you're using for fluency or having the parents? How are they practicing fluency? What's going on with that?
So fortunately, like, we place high value on playing games, and so we have given them, links to all of our math games that we've used before. I guess that would be the main way that we've been doing. Now what's happening, which is really, like, it's the happy accidents. So what has happened in our learning teams is students are starting to create their own games now.
Wow.
Because here's what's happened. They've had these 3 to 4 weeks now that they've been trying out different fluency games. That's caused them to think creatively in mathematics, and now they're designing their own math.
Oh, that's so neat.
Isn't that cool? Like,
yeah.
So that's something that I think we didn't expect to come out of it.
No, you wouldn't. I mean, it's almost like if you would have told them to do it, it wouldn't have been as fun.
Right.
But because of their need to create, their need to be productive, this is what they thought of, and it's neat that they pulled in a math game. It's really cool. I noticed in your background, I see some chart paper back there.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm guessing you've made some attempts to have the children see and feel that this school is somehow like their other school. Anything else besides the chart paper in the back? And I know that the routine and the structure you've mentioned.
Yes. So that's where I filmed my mini lessons.
So
And
the mini lesson, you film it and then they watch it whenever they can and then get busy on it, or?
yes.
Okay.
So they have just like in our classroom, they have a Google slide deck, and they'll have it. There's a writing workshop slide. I use the same structure in the classroom,
Mm-hmm.
and the only difference is there's the link to my video.
Okay.
It is. I think, although I think they're getting tired of hearing me on the video 7 weeks in, but I think there was this comfort, at least for me, that I could do a mini lesson like I'm used to doing, and then I'm knowing that they're working. So,
Right.
like they're working on that, even though I might not be right there. I feel a little bit like Mr. Rogers because I'm interacting with them like they're there
Yeah.
in front of me. But so that's a structure. I think the other thing is read aloud is such
Wow.
it's a bedrock of our classroom community. So I set that up on Flipgrid.
Okay.
And we finished because of Winn-Dixie. That was the book we were in the middle of. And then I've done picture books since we finished. And then they can respond through a video.
Okay.
And then they can, there's a high level of discourse and dialogue in my classroom. And it's not that interactive, but at least they have the opportunity to voice their thinking and then hear what other people are saying. Class meeting is another ritual, and that was important from the very first day. We were very familiar with Flipgrid in my classroom. Okay. So from day one, I posted a question of the day, and I posted like our regular like classroom community ritual, and then they could respond to each other.
Neat. So you did have some of these already in place, that it worked out well so that you could transition and use it now in this NTI type space.
Yes. I have to give a shout out to my colleague, Lauren Rata, because she's our district technology coordinator. Mm-hmm. She had just finished a coaching cycle with me and had introduced some of these tools. So
that's another wonderful outcome.
Yes.
Wow.
It was a good timing for us.
Interesting. Okay. Let's see. You really did just talk about the learning community, and I know how important community is in your classroom. I've been in your live classroom and now in your virtual classroom, and it's obviously it's very evident and very apparent that community is a big part of what you do. What have you learned about your students, and how are they doing with this?
With the
NTI and being away from you, can you tell? And I know you've learned, but first, how are they? And then second, what have you learned?
Well, I get sometimes emotional thinking about how resilient they've been. Mm-hmm. And yet at the same time, emotional, and they've been emotional at different times, and they've struggled at different times through, the 7-week period. But at the same time, I found where, my more quiet, reserved students have actually become much more comfortable.
Yeah.
Opening up and in this platform because, that's a smaller group setting most of the time. I think that I've been really impressed with their commitment to be independent during this time. Mm-hmm. It's something I started talking to them at the very beginning, like, you've got this, you can do this work without support. So this is your time to rise up. And they really have.
That's amazing.
Done that. But I think one of the things that's really has resonated with me is how much they value the social interaction that happens with learning.
Interesting.
They need that. Like, they miss just being able to have collaborative conversations, being able to share their life with the people at their table.
Yeah, those connections.
That's probably been one of the biggest hurdles.
Yeah, they're missing the physical closeness and the ability to touch and be around and feel, someone looking into them or coming close to lean in close to hear what
Yes.
they've got to say and all that kind of thing. Yeah. And they're so young, so it's of course very difficult.
Mhm.
Right.
Well, and I think it's just exactly what you said. So what I thought would be like, sometimes I'd be like, why are they not remembering this? Well, they don't naturally, they've been in the brick and mortar learning environment. Doesn't mean they're going to automatically transfer that experience to their home learning environment.
Yeah, because schools never happened at home. Home
No.
is
And so
different.
there was a huge adjustment to that. Like, even for me, I don't work from home. So
Right.
I think this shouldn't be difficult for me to do. I've been in education for 26 years.
Yeah.
But that doesn't automatically transfer. And they wanted to lean in on their peers, but those peers and their teacher weren't there.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was
They're missing that for sure.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about having a meeting every morning with your team. Have those continued? And also, what about other people in your school, your principal, and what's been happening in terms of, obviously, community is huge to the teachers in your school. That's a cornerstone, or I forgot what the word that you used, but how are they maintaining community among staff and staying in touch with each other?
Yes, and that's been important too. So yes, we thought we would phase out our hour-long PLC meeting every morning, but we haven't.
We need
And,
those, don't we?
and I think it's what's helped us get through it emotionally and mentally through all that. And so we've maintained that. And then our principal has weekly team meeting, staff meeting. So
Okay.
every Monday we meet together, all staff.
Oh gosh.
Yes. It's sort of, I should be careful what I say, but it's just like the kids, like she has to keep us all muted because,
Because it's an adult meeting, right? It's not
Yes.
a student meeting. Yeah.
Yes. So that's been a way that we've been able to stay connected. We are getting ready to start having like our curriculum team. There's a curriculum team. We're getting ready to start meeting a professional learning team. And so we're just now, as things are starting to kind of at least come to an end for our students, we have to work until the 27th of May.
Right.
So we will continue to use virtual meeting spaces to connect and meet with each other. But, we've all been very focused on our students.
Yeah.
There have been many adult collaborations.
Yeah. I don't know how there would be time for that.
Yeah.
The students are so front and center right now, and taking care of their needs has to come first. So
our PLC leaders, we have a PLC lead teacher for every grade level. They actually are meeting, I think, weekly as well with the principal, so that we do have a line of communication.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we just have about 2 more questions that I want to ask you, and you can answer in any order. But one thing is, I want to know what you've learned about yourself during this process, and that might be best to answer last. But we've kind of talked a little bit about how the work of the teachers is shifting from student focused to now learning and getting ready for next year. So if you could just share with me your wish or wishes for school, whatever it's going to be like in the future, what would it be? Or what would your wishes for the future for school be?
Well, so one wish I have, and actually it just recently hit me, is I wish, my wish and my hope is that we really take time to pay attention to, how do I say this, what students have gained from this NTI experience and what educators have gained from this learning experience versus what was lost.
Yeah.
And I know, of course, we're teachers, and already our district is having us put together a educational recovery plan.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if we pay too close attention to a deficit approach or a deficit, or what might not, might not have, I guess, what might have been lost, we might miss out on what students have gained from this experience.
Yeah.
And so that's one of my wishes and hopes. I think another wish and hope is that we don't lose the value of parent partnership. Like for me, parent partnership has gone to a whole nother level. I always sign all of my emails in partnership, but I think now it has that has a whole new meaning. And I want my parents to have a bird's eye view of what's happening in the classroom. They're kind of getting that for us right now.
Yeah.
Based on how we focus the learning. So how can I keep showing my parents a better visual of what their students' learning looks like every day? That would be another.
Yeah, we maybe thought we were communicating with parents before, but we probably weren't. And now we have a better insight into what helps them to know and what helps them to support us in our work.
Yes.
Yeah. And so just last question. I know this is going to be a good one for you because you're so reflective. Learning about yourself during this process.
Okay. Well, I'll try to keep this. I've learned a lot about myself. I think one of the things that I've learned about myself is something that I've always held true, but maybe you get down in the weeds sometimes, is that I have always felt is my mission to ensure the learning of every student. And one of the things that I love about being an educator is that every child is unique. Every child's learning style is different. Mm-hmm. And then with that child, as you get to know them, there's hurdles and roadblocks sometimes. And the joy in teaching is, working with your colleagues, building your own background knowledge to figure out how you're going to get that child through that and on their way, on their learning journey. Well, when this pandemic and we in in a matter of minutes totally shifted to NTI, what I came back to is, well, it's still my responsibility to ensure the learning of every student. Mm-hmm. And so I was actually invigorated at first working with my team on, okay, how are we going to do this? And there was a lot of cognitive challenge in figuring out how to do it. And it was invigorating. And I never want to get complacent in my teaching where I don't feel that. Like, as exhausting as it is and was, it was also a high sense of accomplishment, is that we can figure this out and how to make this work for our families, for our students, so that they have valuable learning experiences at home.
Right. Wow. Thank you.
Yes.
Do you have anything else to add? I know we could talk all day, but we probably shouldn't.
Yes. The only thing I would add is just, I don't know who listens to this, but I just want to thank all levels of education and leadership, down to the classroom teacher, parents, and families, for everybody coming together to do what's best for kids during this time.
Right. Not easy, but definitely
no.
Worthwhile. So before we sign off, I just want to formally thank you again, Amy, for taking time to be with us and to share where you are and what you're doing. Of course, I said it already. I've known you to always be reflective, and that really came through again today. And I think that's one of the most amazing powers. And thank you to our listeners who joined us, and we ask that you can join us in conversation as well. Let us know what you got out of listening in today, what questions you might have, or what strategies you are using to design distance learning for your own students. You can find us on Twitter at CTL Online, on Facebook at Collaborative for Teaching and Learning, and on the web at ctlonline.org. Lastly, support this work and our goal of elevating the voice of teachers during the crisis by sharing this podcast with your fellow educators or on social media, #CrushingCovid. And on that note, take care of yourself and one another, and we will see you next time. Thank you.